Is there any one solo of Kirk's that sticks out to you?
The end solo on one is, in my opinion, top 3 in terms of guitar solos in the world.
Do you remember recording one?
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was, I liked it. I thought it was one of the best songs that they ever done. So yeah, it was a pleasure recording that, and Lars played really well on that.
You know, I read somewhere that the part in one where the drums start to mimic the sound of machine guns, you got that in one take.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff Lars was a champion at the time. So yeah, that was I was actually disappointed because I was looking forward to hearing that particular part of the song like a couple of times, but it was like, okay, fine, good, next. And he was like, what? Yeah, fine, come and have a listen. He didn't believe it himself. We heard it and went, okay, we'll go on. I've always thought Lars was a great drummer, so, you know, I know a lot of people says he can't play drums, but, I mean, what do they know? So, yeah, no, he's a great drummer, and he'd gotten technically better at that point. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a better drummer, that you're technically better, but if you have the musical understanding and the insight Lars has, that made him a better drummer, yeah. As James says, he's the best drummer in Metallica ever, so there you go.
You know, with one, the intro where you have the sound of the helicopters and gunfire, etc., I'm assuming you didn't actually go to a war zone to record those sounds, so where did those sounds come from?
That's all taken from sample CDs. I actually have no recollection of doing that at all. I knew it was going to be there, but I don't think we did that. I think they stuck that in there when they mixed. They always set the bar high, so they actually write songs that they have difficulty playing because it is so difficult. And especially on Injustice, that was pretty crazy. But I mean, we ended up doing Injustice more or less like you would have done it today, because there's tons of edits. I mean, Lars would record like half a minute of drums, and then if there's one hit that was slightly off, I would just edit a piece out of the tape. If one was slightly too early, I would take one of the bits I've edited out earlier and edit that in, so there's like edits on all the drum tracks. And that's what you can do now on digital workstations, which is what everybody's using to record on. But in those days on analog tape, that is the first time I think ever anybody has done that. So I was actually 10 years ahead of time there.
That's funny. What was the most difficult track to record on Injustice?
I can't remember. None of them were like more difficult than the others. It was just, you know, it just took time. It was a hard working process. It took us about 4.5-5 months to record that album. And I mean, they kind of outbeat themselves on the Black Album. That took 1.5 years. But you know, for the budget and for that time, that was the longest review spent on an album ever.
What did you think of the Black Album?
I thought it sounded great. I thought it was super cool. I loved it. I still do. I think it's a really, really good album.
Did you get any sneak peek or hear any demos before it was released?
Lars came by with the finished master tape. He was in Copenhagen. He came by and played it for me in the studio. He's actually I've actually just written a book. It's in Danish, sorry. But Lars has written the foreword, and he actually speaks about that, and it's pretty funny. I won't tell about that. People are gonna have to buy the book. It's in Danish. Sorry, you're gonna have to learn it. I have the foreword in English. I might post that on my website. We'll see, or we'll get the book translated. But I mean, he was himself scared how I would react to the Black Album, but was really happy that I liked it. But he came and played it, beforehand, and it was on a little DAT tape, which is a digital tape that is like very, very small. You can have it in your pocket, smaller than an iPhone. And he said, well, yeah, so this is $2 million right here. I think that's what it cost, the album. I thought it sounded really, really, really good. I really liked it.
So the Black Album, of course, marked a development in Metallica's sound. In terms of development, you got to see James, Lars, and Kirk over the course of 3 records, but only one with Jason. Being the new guy and filling in for Cliff Burton, was Jason nervous at all during the making of Injustice?
No, because, he hung out when we did some of the other stuff. A lot of the times it was just me and Lars in the studio, or me and James in the studio, and Lars and me and Kirk in the studio. But they all came and hung out to see how the progress was going, and so no, I didn't sense any nervousness at all. I mean, I don't think he had anything to be nervous about. He's a great bass player, and as I said, I've heard the bass tracks, so I know they're great. So
yeah, I would love to hear them one day.
Oh yeah, me too. But the tapes are safely in HQ in San Francisco. So yeah, band has them. I think they're going to keep those under lock and key.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of cool family remixes on YouTube which have the boosted bass.
Yeah. People send me those on and off. I'm not really bothered listening to those. I like the original stuff. That's it. That's the way it turned out. That's the way it's supposed to be. People can have their opinions. That's fine, but don't waste my time by fucking around with them.
One of the things that record is known for is that lyrically, And Justice is often regarded as the darkest Metallica record. Did it strike you as that when you first heard the songs?
I mean, the whole genre is pretty dark, so I was, it was kind of what I expected. It's only in hindsight that I maybe can see that it was probably a bit darker than some of the other ones.
Another interesting thing And Justice is noted for is Kirk Hammett's guitar work. You mentioned a little earlier how highly you think of his end solo on One. In general, how is Kirk in the studio? Is he easy to work with?
Yes and no. What happens is that he gets the songs and he starts composing solos. And then once we're done with the rhythm guitars and the bass tracks, we stick his solos on, alternate between vocals and solos. And sometimes he would have an idea and he would play a solo, and it was always me and Lars sitting kind of coaching him on that. And he would sometimes come with stuff we didn't really like, and some of the solos are actually composed by Kirk, Lars, and me, and in cooperation, because we change it. Lars is really, really good at that. Lars could be a great record producer one day if he wanted to, because he's got a good vision of what you need sound-wise and progression-wise, and all his references are old metal albums. So yeah, some of the solos they were kept right off the bat, and some of the solos we had to work hard with, and we changed a lot in those. But it was still just work. We want this to be the best thing ever, so we have to put in the effort.
That's awesome. And Kirk, he's of course famous for various reasons, one of them being his use of the wah pedal. From your experience, does he approach the wah pedal in a unique way?
I think he's one of the few people in the world where it kind of becomes a part of his body. I think he uses it pretty well. I'm a big fan. That's one of the other things we wanted to do was change the sound during the solos, which not a lot of people did. They play a solo and it would be the same sound from start to beginning. We did a lot of experimenting by doing changing sounds, and even putting harmonies on some parts and then coming back to the original, so stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons why everything is so well documented in terms of sounds, because sometimes you had to come back to the sound you started with at the end of the solo, and everything would be changed around like 15 times during the solo. So yeah, his wah work is fantastic. I love when he starts doing that.
Yeah, for sure. So I got a few more And Justice related questions for you, but first I have a couple of more general questions about the band. One of the things I find really interesting about Metallica's history is that even when they were on their independent label Megaforce, they were still selling tens of thousands of records, which is an amazing accomplishment, especially considering they were a new band at the time. Would you happen to have any insight into how Metallica handled the business end of things at that time?
No, they've always had the business end in the States, and I'm in Europe, so I don't know. But from the time they get Q Prime as management, they pretty much take care of all that. But I think Lars is a good entrepreneur, so I think he probably took care of most of that. That's my guess. It's because the drive and energy Lars has that, you know, he's been booking concerts left and right to make sure they come out and play, which is the best way to present your music. So I don't know that anything about the business side, but I would guess that a lot of that has to do with Lars being the driving force he actually is.
A lot of people say that Lars is the businessman of the band, so to speak. Would you agree with that? Is that fair to say?
I think so, yeah.
Interesting. In terms of Cliff, I've heard him being compared to a mixture of the Misfits, Zeppelin, and Beethoven.
Actually, a pretty good comparison, because he had that good Zeppelin drive and Misfits, and then he had that classical approach. So yeah, that's a pretty good description. He was a crazy bass player actually, because he didn't like headphones. So actually, for the basses, the 2 albums I did with him, I actually hooked up a pair of speakers and stuck his bass amp in another room, and he could like run around and play his bass to the sound on the speakers, so he didn't have to hear headphones. So it's just like playing live, and that's the way we got the best performances. And he did some pretty crazy stuff. So I normally tell people that some of the solos they think are guitar solos, that's Cliff on his bass, because he had all these pedals he fiddled about. But he was innovative in a way that no other bass players was at that time.
Between Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, did Cliff grow as a musician, or was he essentially the same player?
No, I thought he'd gotten a lot better. I mean, they went basically on tour for most of the time, and that really sharpens your chops as a musician. So they were all of them were way better when we did Master of Puppets. But I mean, so was I, because I knew what the band was all about.
Interesting. Do you remember recording the Cliff Burton tribute on Injustice, To Live Is to Die?
To Live and to Die, exactly, yeah. To Live and to Die, yeah. That was pretty emotional, because he wrote most of that. And we did a lot of stuff, you know. We remembered Cliff doing that.
What was the atmosphere like when Cliff was in the band compared to when Jason joined?
All the time Cliff was in the band, it was like these 4 kids that had known each other for a long time, that kind of, it's us against the world, and they were all, you know, they're basically fighting the Metallica fight. You know, we need to make Metallica the best thing ever. It kind of changed a bit when Jason entered the band, which is also well documented, because Jason was a fan, and they actually hated that about him. That's probably also part of the story about the missing bass on Injustice for All. They just tried to get a reaction from him, but he was still too new in the band to do anything. I mean, I'm guessing what they wanted him to do was to speak out and be his own personality, you know, so, which is always more interesting than, you know, fans can be annoying, right? Everybody who just says yes and you're great to everything you do, that's not very good. And I think eventually he got fed up with being, you know, the new kid for such a long time. But, you know, during the Justice for All recordings, that thing hadn't come yet. So it was, as far as I'm concerned, all hunky-dory. We were all happy and doing it. Jason actually, because we got into a bit of a time trouble, he actually recorded the basses at night while we were sleeping with the assistant engineer Toby, and we would like before we start, we'd say, you do this and that, just play through with him a couple of times, and he would like kind of perfect that during the night. So the bass tracks on Injustice for All actually really good, though nobody ever heard them except me, Jason, and a couple of other guys. And then we come in the morning and check it out, and everybody was really happy. So there you go. But it was slightly different because he was new, and also because he was so much a fan.
Were you surprised with how in the final mix the bass essentially isn't there?
Oh yeah, I was like, what the? I'm like, okay, that's the way to do it, but I think some of my rough mixes are actually better than that. But I mean, buy the huge the anniversary box, the big with the vinyls and stuff. There's one full CD of my rough mixes. That sounds pretty good. But yeah, I mean, again, it's it's a statement in time. People always ask, why don't they ask you to remix it? No, because it's out, it's done, and then that's the way it is. You can't go back and change it because it would be something totally different. It was like when McCartney remixed "Let It Be." It sounded really boring because he took all the quirkiness that Phil Spector done. Those kind of things. So I mean, just leave it. It is the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, I'm a fan of that album anyway. Even though I can't hear the bass. Also, that album is probably one of the albums in the history of music that inspired most bands to start. I mean, there's a lot of metal bands out there that if you ask them, why did you start in the band? They say, well, we heard Injustice for All and we want to be like those guys. So, maybe we should turn the bass down on all music from now.
Did you ever talk to Jason about the missing bass? Did you ever get his thoughts on it?
No, unfortunately not, no. I'd love to. I was supposed to meet him a couple of years ago, and then, timing and all this stuff, and it went haywire because it would have been great to have heard what, for me and him to sit down and talk about it. But I think it's a mix between them trying to get a reaction from Jason and them not, them meaning Lars and James, not having processed Cliff's dead yet, and actually still mourning and not come to terms with the fact that he wasn't in the band anymore because he was dead. So yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you're gonna have to talk to the guys about that. But that's my guessing.
One thing I've never really understood about the whole situation is that even if you're looking to haze Jason for whatever reason, by removing the bass, the whole album suffers to a certain extent, unless of course the band felt it sounded better without the bass.
They probably thought that the bass was going to be like the low end of the guitar riff, which is basically what it is now. I'm pretty sure if you had the mix up and you turned the bass off, you would hear the difference. So it's definitely there, although it's not as pronounced as it is in a lot of other albums. But yeah, it is strange, yeah. But I mean, maybe they sat down and heard it and went, that's fucking great. I can hit my drums are loud, the guitars are loud, the vocal are loud. Fine. Next.
You brought up a point a couple of moments ago about Cliff's death, which of course is one of the biggest tragedies in metal history. For you personally, how did you hear the news and what was your reaction to it, if I may ask?
It was horrible. I was sleeping at my house and my mom called me because she gets up earlier than I do. And she said, one of the guys in Metallica died. I was like, what? And she didn't know which one it was. So I had to, make a lot of phone calls and just to find out what the hell is going on. But it was in all news in Denmark had the story. So, and this was before the internet. So, you had to listen to radios and, call people. But yeah, it was devastating. I mean, they were on the way to play a gig in Copenhagen. We were going to meet up that afternoon, right? And bus fucking turns over. When Cliff was in the band, they were, you gotta understand the 3 albums I did with Metallica was on the rise. Every album just went one level higher all the time, and it's always easier when you can see it's getting better and better and better. Once you get to the top and have to stay there, that's when all the problems sets in, which everybody knows if they've seen their movie.
No, for sure. So what was Cliff like in the studio? From what I've heard, he was the most musically gifted. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he was the only one that actually been schooled in music. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he was the better musician. I rate James pretty high up there as one. I think James is probably the best rhythm guitar player in the world. But he was definitely the most schooled music-wise, and some of the parts he came up with were things that nobody in a metal band would ever have done except for Cliff. So yeah, he was great, and he was just a mellow, kind, dude that we hung out. We recorded at night, and we kind of made it so that we started at 7. Actually, on Master of Puppets, we started at 6 at my house, and they and they came and ate. My wife made dinner for them. And then we discussed what we needed to do during the night, and we'd walk to the studio from my house, which was like 3 minutes. And once we'd finished recording, it would be 4 or 5, something like that. And they would always make sure they got to the hotel, because they were staying at a hotel on Master of Puppets, because now they were on a major label, so they could afford it. And the morning buffet opened at 6, so they always they were there at 6 so they could eat breakfast buffet and then go to bed and sleep. So they got up and got to my house to eat dinner. So during that time, once we're done and they were going to like waste an hour or so, we were sitting, having a beer, playing poker. He liked playing poker. So yeah, he was just a cool dude to hang out with. He was really nice, really gentle. Knew a lot of stuff about things, so you could sit and talk with him for hours and hours.